So I found out what my nickname was. My nickname was Night Stalker because they'd never seen a game warden working at night before.
Hello, and welcome to the Wild Dispatch. This episode is actually a second and follow-up episode to my conversation with Dennis McKiver. Dennis has spent his career being the guy that you call when the shit hits the fan. So he will either zoom in on a speedboat or jump from a plane, I should say, and come and rescue you, no matter pretty much anywhere you are in the world, be it on mountains, in oceans, or in the middle of a war zone. If you haven't heard the first part of that story, then I definitely recommend you go and hear the things that somehow Dennis has survived through. But if you have heard the first part, then buckle up and hang on, because we're going to start the second part now.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch! I want to say in England they have a thing called like National Guard, but it's the Air
National Guard.
National Guard.
Yeah.
How many years were you doing that for?
From 77 to 94.
Okay, a long time.
Yeah, so like 17 years.
And that was more ocean. That was always ocean based.
Well, because of where we were stationed.
Where was that again? So
I was down at Moffett.
Yes.
Down by San Jose.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Because of where we were stationed, we did a lot of, and because of our abilities, we did a lot of ocean rescue. Okay, and the reason being is if you have a rescue, okay, one thing is federal government can't compete with private enterprise.
I remember you telling me about this rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem with the rule is it's gotten some people killed, because if I have a private helicopter rescue service, the local sheriff or anybody can't ask for the Air Force to come in or Air National Guard to come in and do that rescue. He's got to pay that private rescue service to come do it.
So it's like you're not allowed to compete using like the government kind of
Yeah, so
resources.
like the Coast Guard here, if you break down in your boat out there and you call for help, the Coast Guard can come out here and tow you in, because there's no private tow service here. If you're out of San Francisco, you're going to pay $6,000 to get yourself towed back into San Francisco Bay, because there's private tow services down there.
So that's what you really, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like it's there, and that's what you have to use, and
That's
you
what
have to pay that money if you want to be
You have to pay that
saved.
money. So even when I was up in Mount Rainier, I saw people die because the Park Service had to call the private helicopter to come rescue somebody when they could have called us.
And that's time and politics and
Time and politics, but it's this rule that was passed politically years ago that said the federal government can't compete with private business.
And I'm guessing the equipment that you guys have versus what the private businesses have is different.
It's much better.
And training.
Yeah, much better, and the training's better. Yeah, like I set up. I bought myself a helicopter. I'm going to set up a private rescue. Okay. I don't have a hoist on my helicopter. Okay. I'm going to go in and rescue this guy out of the forest, but you got to pack him a mile over here to this clearing where I can land and we can pick him up.
So you would then have to go in there and move him to an area
And move
where
him
he
over
could be
there where he
hoisted.
could be picked up.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, unless,
Whereas you could just go in and hoist him
in
out.
the meantime, yeah, whereas you call the Air Force in, they become in, we'll just hover over and hoist him out.
Meanwhile, he's like bleeding to death
Yeah.
or cold or...
Yeah.
That sounds tough.
That's tough, yeah. So we would get called, so the reason we got these missions is because the Coast Guard has a Coast Guard station in San Francisco at the airport. And if all these ships that are transiting the ocean, they're required to have a dispensary on board, a medical room with medical stuff.
Yeah.
But there's nothing saying they have to be trained to use it.
Oh.
They don't have to have a doctor on board the ship. just have to have the first aid kit and all that. You know, somebody's supposed to have first aid or something like that, but something serious, they can't deal with it. Okay.
Okay.
So what happens when an international ship is passing through and somebody gets hurt, they have a heart attack, I've had burn victims, appendicitis, bleeding ulcers, things like that, where somebody needs to be, you know, respiratory illness, somebody needs to be evacuated, they call the Coast Guard. That's
Because
for international.
they have all the gear, but they have
Yeah, well,
literally all the gear, no idea.
Yeah, so they have to call the Coast Guard for evacuation for help. You
Yeah.
watch that show Wicked Tuna, you know, sometimes they're calling the Coast Guard to come out and take somebody off the boat.
Okay.
So they call the Coast Guard. Well, the Coast Guard doesn't have air refuelable helicopters. The new helicopters they have a longer range than they used to, but they used to only be able to go, when I was in, they could only go out 180 miles, and then they have maybe 10 minutes lag time on scene before they have to turn around. They're going to run out of gas.
Oof.
We had air refuelable helicopters. We could go beyond that 180 miles. We could go 600 miles. We could go 1,200 miles. I think the furthest one we did was 2,400 miles one time.
Really?
Yeah. Like the first one I had was 600 miles. So they would call us all the time to do these missions that are beyond, you know, hey, we got an injured seaman on a freighter that's 600 miles off the coast. And can you guys go out and pull him off for us?
Yeah.
So we would go do it. And the way we would do it, because we'd get out there quicker, is we'd take out the C-130. And also, you know, a lot of times we use this for training. You know, this is a mission we're supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
We might as well do what we're supposed to do. I mean, we could fly out the whole way in the helicopter with just getting air refueled and then pick the guy up. Probably been the safest thing to do. But we'd do what we were trained to do. We'd go out there and parachute into the water, climb aboard the ship, do our medical, whatever we need to with the patient there, whatever he needs, get him all bundled up and ready to go. You know, get an IV started and everything, get him in a Stokes litter or whatever if they had one, or we'd use ours when they brought ours out.
Yeah.
And we'd hoist them off and then fly them back to mainland to the hospital.
So I'm guessing in the time that you've flown in with a C-130, then a chopper's also going to
Yeah,
to then
so I
hoist
mean,
up by the time you've got it fixed
the C-130 might be able to get us out there in an hour.
What, 600 miles in an hour?
Well, not 600 miles. That would probably take 3 hours.
Okay.
Maybe 2.5.
Okay, so they're going a bit slower than like a regular jumbo jet.
Yeah, they're going to they're doing like 200 knots in the C-130, and the helicopter's doing like 150 knots at full speed. You know.
Okay.
And they're going to come out there later, but they don't have enough gas to get out there, so they got to kind of delay. So after the C-130 drops us in the water, they've got fuel tanks on there. They go back and air refuel the helicopter and escort him out there. So that gives us an hour or two to get the patient prepared.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like first you've got to get on the boat.
First we got to get on the...
Imagine sometimes if the proverbial shit is hitting the fan.
Yeah. So
have you ever had some situations where there's like big storms going on?
Oh,
you have to
yeah,
get on a boat?
Probably the worst one I had, I think this was the 600-mile one, was off. He was in a 60-foot commercial fishing boat, small for being that far off, but he was fishing his way to Hawaii.
Okay.
And the guy got a bleeding ulcer. He was going to bleed to death if we didn't get there and get an IV started and get him off.
Okay.
Okay, had one other crew member on board. It was nighttime. It was 30-foot seas, rough ocean.
Yeah.
Nighttime, and we had to go out there and parachute into. The worst thing, it was storming. It was overcast.
Okay.
We had, when we parachute with an overcast, the pilots are supposed to have 500 feet of clearance overhead.
Okay.
So if you have a 1,500 feet of clearance, they're going to parachute us at 1,000 feet.
Okay.
Okay. And if it's a life or death real mission, they can go lower.
They can.
We can go lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they could have less ceiling over their head.
Okay. So you don't want to be dropping out in the cloud.
don't want to in the cloud. No, you
No.
want to be able to see where you're getting out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So is it like
You want-
literally you're looking out the back of a door that's open?
yeah.
And
So
you're
we're
like,
looking
you
at
can see the.
we
It's
can
like
see.
you can see the boat, and you're
we can
like
see the
going,
boat
right, I'm
and
going
we-
to jump
we-
and then jump towards it.
Yeah, but you drop a flare to see where the wind's blowing and whatnot,
Okay.
and thing. And when this boat was smaller, so he could maneuver and pick us up. Although the waves are so bad, that's difficult to do. But we have them go so they're drifting this way in the wind, and then we're landing here, and then the boat's drifting to us while we're swimming to the boat.
So you're not chasing a boat.
We're not
It's
chasing
coming
the
to
boat.
you.
It's drifting to us.
Which can be
Because if
good.
you up here, you can't swim that fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So then you're there, and you've got to the boat. It's come to you.
Yeah.
How do you get on?
Well, see this. So this fishing boat, it's like going in the waves, rocking like this, and he had these car tires for bumpers on the side of the boat. He threw a car tire over the side.
Yeah.
And the boat's going up and down, and you're there trying to time it. And,
So like 30 feet up in the air.
yeah. So you're trying to like grab the car tire and get yanked out of the water, and then try to get your gear on and climb on board. And there's two of us having to do this, and we're trying to help each other. So
Yeah.
we managed to do it, and then we got on the boat. We're both so seasick, and then
Didn't you at some point though, like, get sucked under the boat? Was that
that
time?
was another time.
Oh, that was another time. Okay.
This boat is kind of going with the waves.
Okay.
So because it's going with the waves, it's rocking like this, but it's small enough boat. It's going with the waves.
Okay.
So you're going with the waves, and it's going with the
It's
waves.
bobbing, you're bobbing.
And it's rocking, and the mainly is you got to grab when the thing rocks down, where you can grab the railing of the boat and the tire or whatever, and you get rocked back up and flop yourself into the boat.
Okay. But it's
And you got like 200 pounds of gear with you too, so it's like
and it's a crazy roller coaster.
Yeah.
And did you say you were getting seasick?
yeah. So I should have given myself a shot of anti-nauseant, which we carried before, but I didn't because I never get seasick. It was so rough that I got seasick. The other guy got seasick. My partner got seasick. He goes, I'm throwing up, so he goes in to see the patient is in the captain's bunk room, and he's trying to start an IV, and he goes, I can't get the RV started. He comes out, he's throwing up, so I can't get the IV started. I stumble in there, and I got the IV started with this first shot, so I got the IV started, and I go back out, and he goes in.
So you're basically doing a relay of vomiting.
We're relaying vomiting. So then we waiting for the helicopters now to come and get us, and so we got an IV in him now. We can keep him alive and for a while, and the helicopter gets out there, and then they got to hoist us off the boat. Well, these commercial tuna fishing boats got lines everywhere.
Okay.
There's nothing really clear.
Yeah.
So
It's moving a
we're in
bunch
the
as
back
well.
of the boat, one little clearer in the back of the boat, and the hoist operator's got to put the hoist down for us, and then we get the patient up, use a tag line with the litter so it doesn't spin or start swinging. So we're holding it down here. Well,
Okay.
they're hoisting it up, and he hoists it up. They get him. The first one, the other PJ goes in first, so he can help the guy running the hoist, the flight engineer, pull the litter in.
Yeah.
So he goes up, and then the patient goes up, and then I go up. Well, and when I go up, the litter's not there. It's not the litter. They just send in what they call the force penetrator. It's a weighted thing that's got seats you fold down, and you sit on that and strap yourself in. And they lift you off the boat or out of the jungle or whatever.
Okay.
So I get on the force penetrator, and the boat's going up and down, and he's got to time it so he gets me off the boat and doesn't snag me on the line. So
Yeah.
for some reason, I don't know what he did, he hesitated, but he picked me up off the boat, and then he thought I was going to get snagged in the line or something. He dropped me back down, and then he picked me back up again. When he picked me up the second time, he had dropped me in their tub full of fishing lures.
Oh,
So I come up, and I got these tuna lures hanging all over me.
like giant hooks.
Yeah, like big hooks with the tuna lures.
Wow,
Stuck in my
a 6-inch hook? Or
yeah,
something?
like stuck in my wetsuit and whatnot. The double tuna hook.
Oh no.
So I survived that one.
You survived, but you were covered in like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I should have. I think I still have some of those hooks. I should have marked them and saved them as a souvenir and put them on the board. We might have put them on the board. So one of the things we did when we did a mission as a souvenir, whoever goes up last, most boats have multiple life rings on there that has the name of the boat on there.
Yes.
So we would grab one of the life rings and take that up with us, and that would become a plaque. We'd put it on the life ring with a picture of the crew, a little story of the mission. And so if you go into today, you go down to the section down there, all these life rings are lining the hallway with all the story of all the missions that have been done. So
it's a small price to pay for
small
being
price
saved.
to pay. So I got a number of those because I was working there full time, and I was there.
Yeah.
When the mission came up, I was available.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lived right close to the base, or for a while I was living in the office, sleeping on the floor in the office, and then I got an apartment right outside the base. So I was kind of the closest person. So whenever we didn't have a crew on standby all the time. We just wait. When they called somebody in. They started calling around to see who was available. And, one story was I was going to college when I was living up in Reading, and they called me and said, "We got a plane crash up by Mount Shasta. Are you available?" I said, "Yeah, I can be." And they said, "Where shall we pick you up?" I said, "Well, how about the 50-yard line of the football field?" "Okay." So I kind of impressed.
Was there a football game going on?
No. It was the middle of the afternoon, but
Okay.
it was before practice, and it was the wrong season too for football. So
Okay.
that's why I suggested that. But it was kind of fun because I to impress my friends, had my private helicopter come in and pick me up off the football field and take me off to go do this other rescue.
Yeah.
Which turned out not to be a rescue; it turned out to be a body recovery. So.
Oh, shame.
Yeah. Which
Guess is
most plane crashes are, unless you or a military plane that has an ejection seat, then you get a rescue out of that one.
Yeah, it's kind of the reality of it, I guess.
Yeah.
So did you have any kind of close ones yourself when you were doing those rescues?
All of them were kind of close. In fact, that one I skipped over the part where.
So which one? Sorry.
Well, the one with the fishing boat.
Okay, with the fishing boat that you were covered in hooks.
The fishing boat was covered in hooks. Well, my partner who was with me, I was the team leader.
Yeah.
So I was the one to make the decision: can we do this jump or not? Because
Okay.
we had like a 900-foot ceiling.
Yeah.
And the pilot wanted to know how low we could jump. And so I said, "Well, how much altitude can you get us?
How low can you go?
How high can you go?
Yeah.
Without getting into the clouds?" And
Okay.
he said, "Well, it gets you about 500 to 800 feet. Don't go below 500 feet. We can do it." So I don't know what the altitude exactly was, but it was pretty low. It was close to 500 feet, and we jumped out and.
That's so low. That's
Yeah.
like, I'm just doing some math in my head, like 170
The only thing you
meters
have
or
to
something.
know we're jumping static line at the time.
Okay, so you don't have to do anything.
We don't have to pull anything. It's static line. So on a C-130, you're going so fast, your parachute is fully open before you drop below the aircraft.
Okay.
So you go out, and with the wind blast, it opens up your parachute, and your parachute is open before you even start going below the aircraft.
So there's not even really a falling moment. You're just
No,
like,
it's not a falling moment. The only thing you're risking there is if you had a malfunction, you might not have time to get your reserve out.
because
Then you are having to pull something.
You're falling at like 200 miles an
Yeah.
hour, and it's only
You're
Yeah,
120 miles, but
Oh, sorry.
you're probably you don't build up that much speed right away, so you might be falling at 90 miles an hour, and you got to be going fast enough to have that parachute deploy. And you probably at 500 feet, you'd probably hit the ground first.
okay.
Yeah, that's another funny story. But anyway, my partner, he when we got on the boat, one of the first things he says is, "I can't believe how fast we came down." I says, "Well, we weren't that high."
Yeah.
Because normally we jump at 1,500 feet with a static line.
Okay.
But we were jumping about 500 feet.
Like a third of the height.
Yeah, and he had no time to get. He just jumped out and he hit the water, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's because we weren't very high. Hate to tell you this, but I made a decision that we could live through this,
Yeah.
and we did.
Yeah.
But I'm glad your parachute opened.
Yeah, that was lucky.
That reserve you had on there you didn't need, or you wouldn't have needed. So
you were saying that there was a moment where it was like a close call. I guess
that was
the
a
height.
close call. Was the height on there, and then just getting on the on the boat's always a close call.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there was another mission on another one where we were on a freighter that was a container ship.
Yeah.
And I think this guy was a burn patient. He'd like lighten the barbecue and spilled some fluid in it, and he got burned really bad. So we had to like take him off the boat, and I had him all bundled up and everything, and we had him in the Stokes litter. And there's no place to land on a container ship because there's containers.
Yeah.
Except you come out of the pilot house is real tall because you got to look out over the top of the containers.
Like a big cockpit.
So there's a door there, and you can come out and you can walk out across the top of the containers. Well, these ships are going across the ocean.
Yeah.
These containers are as slick as snot. I mean, they're like slip and slides.
Yeah.
They're covered in algae and ocean spray and whatever. So they're
whatever's growing there.
It's like slippy, and we just have our wetsuit booties on and stuff like that. And so we're up there, and we got the guy bundled up in there, and there's two of us holding on to him. Then we're sitting in the middle of on these top of these containers, and it's probably a 60-foot drop. These containers are like 4 or 5 high, and then I don't know how tall they are. They're like 12 feet tall, and there's like 4 or 5, and then there's probably 60 to 100 feet down to the water.
Yeah.
If you don't hit something on the way down.
Yeah.
So we're holding on to this thing, and the helicopter comes in to pick us up. Well, these helicopters have the wind force of a hurricane.
Okay.
On the rotor wash.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the center of the it's like a hurricane. It's the eye of the hurricane. It's calm right into the center. But when the helicopter comes like this, you're getting blown.
So if they come in from the side.
If they come in too low, so they're supposed to come in high and then come down on us.
Yeah.
But their normal approach is to come in like this, but they get what they call ground effect. Helps them get into hover easier. But it's like, no, when you're doing this, you come in high and you drop down.
So that you remain in the eye.
Yeah, so you capture us in the ice and don't blow us off the ship.
And how big is that eye?
Well, the eye is probably maybe 10 meters across.
Wow, 30 feet.
Yeah,
so like that's
at
not
the most.
That's not a
no,
big area.
it's like the size of the helicopter rotor wash.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the size of the body of the helicopter. It might not even be 10 meters. It might be more like 5. So anyway, they got to capture you in that. Well, they did, and he came in low, and we start sliding, slip and slide across the top of these slick containers, and we're about to go over the edge.
Because you've got nothing to grab.
There's nothing to grab. It's just slick.
It's just mud.
Yeah. Well, just luckily, on the corner of these containers is the lifting eyes.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So luckily, I slid towards one of the corners before we went over the side, and I was able to get my foot out and stop this from sliding. As we're doing this sliding as we're on the radio, screaming at the pilot to
like
pull up, and come back in high.
Ugh.
And of course the flight engineer, he's seeing what is going on too, so he's the one running the hoist. He's yelling at the pilot too, telling him to not come in so low.
So everyone was okay. Like
everybody's okay. So
they
lifted off, went around, came in like they were supposed to do,
but you nearly dropped off like at a minimum 60-foot drop.
Yeah.
Onto steel.
Yeah.
That is not ideal.
So, and then the other time was we on these big ships, and I think it was another container ship. It was a big merchant ship, and what we'd have them do is, especially if the ocean was a little bit rough, we'd have them laid sideways to the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So the wind's coming this way, and they're blowing sideways. So same thing, they're going to blow towards us. We're going to land here, and they're going to blow over to us, and we're going to swim over to them. And then they put a rope ladder down.
Yes. Yeah.
And we might be a 60-foot rope. I mean, it's got to go all the way down the side of this container ship, and we got to climb it with all our gear.
Yeah.
So that's why we had to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, of course.
And
it's like a bucking bronco.
Yeah. And so on this occasion, sometimes it's calm and you don't have a problem. On this occasion, the swell was just right where the ship the swell was the same direction as the wind, so the ship was rocking in the swell like this.
It's like corkscrewing.
Like, well, it was just rocking back and forth.
Okay.
So it's just rocking back and forth, and then
Like side to side.
we're swimming up to it like this, and as we get close to the ship, it rocks up this way. And I didn't realize, because I hadn't had this happen before, I got sucked under the ship.
And this is like a many, many thousand-ton ship.
Oh yeah, right. So then I see this massive ship above me coming down on me, and I'm just like, I'm dead.
Just like ready.
I just
for the
realized
end.
I was dead. The ship's going to fall on my head. Well, it just spit us back out. My partner's there doing the same thing. So it spit us, as it come down, the waves spit us back out.
So like the force of whatever it was, the water shot you out like a big super soaker or something.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a wave. You know, it's creating a wave, just pushing us out, and then it sucks us back in and pushes us out. So then it was like, okay, we got to get lined up with the rope ladder, and then when it sucks us in, we got to grab the rope ladder before we go underneath.
So don't go under.
Or grab the rope ladder on your way back out. And of course, there's only one rope ladder, so we got to take turns doing this. So one of us is getting sucked in and out, while the other one's climbing the rope ladder. So
yeah, that sounds terrifying.
So that one was kind of hairy. There was probably, as it turned out, not as dangerous as we thought it was when it happened, but we thought we were dead because we see this giant ship coming down on top of
Just the hull of a ship. I can only imagine like a giant hull smashing down on you.
Yeah.
That's got to be a scary moment.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's wild.
that was probably the biggest adventures.
Yeah.
So I had like 3 of these missions like that in a row.
Yeah.
And most to pararescue, because there's enough of us so we don't get that many missions. It's kind of like we hope to get 1 mission in our career.
Okay.
And I had like a half a dozen or more in 1 year.
In 1 year?
Yeah.
Oh, because you were the guy who was living.
I was the guy that
you
was
were
there. I was close. I was available. I wasn't married. You know, I didn't have things going on. It's like I can come in and do it. So they nominated me that year. It was 1985 when I got all those missions, and then so they nominated me for Airman of the Year.
Oh.
And then for our unit.
Yeah.
And then I got selected as Airman of the Year for the whole nation.
Wow.
And then so they got a trip back to Washington, D.C., take a tour of the Pentagon, go to the White House, meet the President. And,
you never told me about this.
yeah, and then took us around to all the sites around there. And then one of the places they flew us out to the Air Force Academy, which wasn't Washington, D.C., but they flew us out one day out there just to go take a tour of the Air Force Academy. Did you ever hear of Greg Louganis?
No.
Okay.
Who's Greg Louganis?
Greg Louganis is a famous diver,
Okay.
Olympic diver.
Yes, okay.
And he was so much bigger than stronger than, he was a big guy compared to all the other divers, which were all small kids.
Yeah.
And he was so much bigger and stronger than everybody. He was like won multiple gold medals at multiple Olympics, that he would jump higher than everybody else. That's why he could do.
So he got more air.
He could get more air and do more flips, and so he'd always win the gold medal kind of thing. Well, the Air Force Academy was the training center for the U.S. Olympic team.
Okay.
And so we're taking a tour through the Air Force Academy, and we're going through there, and they're showing us the pool, the Olympic pool at the Air Force Academy, and they go, and it's kind of like, why is there a big cutout above the high dive up there? He says, oh, we had to build that for Greg Louganis because he hit the ceiling doing his dive, so we had to cut it out and make the ceiling higher.
Oh. He's like bumping his head on the way
Instead of
up.
bumping his head or a foot or whatever, he was swinging around.
Oh, brilliant.
And then they took us to, what's the name? It was in Tennessee. I'm blanking out on the name, but the place where they created the first atomic bomb
Okay.
was at a place in Tennessee. So they take us a tour through there, and it's like, oh, they show us the pool there. You look down the water, there's a glow down in the pool down. Oh, that's the nuclear reactor down in the middle of this. It's protected by water,
Okay.
cooling it around the nuclear reactors. Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think the best, I like the tour of the Pentagon and the tour of the White House was the best.
And this is all because you won the award.
Yeah. So
Airman of the Year.
Yeah, but then it was kind of a recruiting thing. because they get you back there,
Yeah.
and then they gave an Airman of the Year for each rank.
Yes.
So I was like I think an E8 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you get back there, and then there's the National Guard headquarters for the National Guard and Air National Guard is there at the Pentagon too. So you have to go there, because we're in the Air National Guard. So anyway, they try to recruit you while you're there.
Recruit you to be a recruiter.
No, recruit you for whatever job to work at the Pentagon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what they were tempting you into something.
Yeah, I mean, eventually I could have taken the job and been the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force kind of thing.
Oh, really?
That's what they're kind of recruiting you for.
Okay.
That is but basically get in the political end of the military,
And you didn't fancy that?
I mean, it was kind of cool. I really liked Washington, D.C. and everything, but then I thought, I don't really want to live back here. But I was single and not doing anything at the time, but I actually had just got hired by Fish and Game.
Okay.
I actually left the Fish and Game Academy to go on this trip.
So the award had happened after.
The award happened right after I got hired for Fish and Game.
Okay.
And the funny story is get this, I'm a paramedic with the Air Force.
Yeah.
I had my civilian certification for teaching first aid and CPR.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a first aid CPR instructor, as well as being a paramedic for the Air Force. And when you go to a police academy, you have to take first aid and CPR. Okay?
Okay.
Which I could teach.
Yeah.
I was certified to teach that.
Yeah.
When I went to the academy, when I went on this trip, the only thing I missed was the first aid and CPR.
Okay. So then that worked out perfectly.
No, it didn't.
Oh.
They said you can't graduate
Oh, come on.
because you didn't go to our first aid CPR training. They were punishing me for being in the military is what they were doing.
Okay. So you managed. So then you had to do extra classes, or
No, I had to come back. I had to come back a month later and go through the next academy class, first aid and CPR training,
Ugh.
before I could go off and finish my Fish and Game field training officer training.
That sounds frustrating.
Yeah, it was. Well, the big thing was that what they were doing was illegal, but then Fish and Game wouldn't push the issue. They could have said, no, you can't do that because that's illegal.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't. They didn't want to.
Rock the boat.
They didn't want to rock the boat with this academy. It wasn't our own academy. We were using somebody else's. It was Santa Rosa Junior College. They didn't want to rock the boat, and they said, "Oh, just come back here. You'll work in the office for a month, and then we'll, give you some office work to do, and then you can go back and take the first aid CPR."
So you resisted the temptation of lofty promotion within the military.
Yeah, I mean, when they came back and said I couldn't graduate from the police academy, I almost said, "Well, fine, I'll go back in the military full time."
But you didn't.
I didn't.
So then, I guess that means you ended up where you were planning to go in the first place.
I ended up where I planned to go in the first place.
And so where did that start? Like where were
So,
you based?
You go through the academy, kind of same thing like pararescue. Depending on how high you get in the academy, you get to pick
Okay.
the available positions that are open.
Yeah.
So I was living down in Mountain View, down by.
Yeah.
By.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, so that's right next to
Down in
Moffett
the Bay
Field.
Area, yeah.
Right next to Moffett Field. I was living in Mountain View, right outside the base, and so I picked what was open at the time was Boulder Creek.
Okay.
Boulder Creek's a little town up between Mountain View and Santa Cruz up in the mountains.
Oh, cool.
Cool little town up in the hills. I said, cool, I can be the Boulder Creek warden. Well, at the time, so I had to go to the Fish and Game Academy for, what was it at the time? It was 16 weeks or something. I had to go to the Fish and Game Academy. And then before I got out of the Fish and Game Academy, they don't do this anymore, but somebody decided they wanted to transfer to Boulder Creek.
Okay.
So somebody was already on Fish and Game.
Yeah.
Said, "Oh, I want the Boulder Creek position." That's not really fair. You promised it to me, and now you're giving it. So they changed that since then. Once it's open, they give it to somebody in the academy. They don't let somebody else transfer into it.
Yes.
Okay, so I ended up having to switch to the next closest place was this San Mateo.
Okay.
So I started out in San Mateo, which was kind of interesting. I kind of liked it. It was one of my jobs was inspecting fish and game that was coming and going out of San Francisco Airport.
Okay.
And there was a lot,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So that was fun, you know. One of the times Pan American Airlines at the time was there.
Okay.
So they
That's
had
Pan Am, right?
Pan Am, yeah.
Yeah.
So they had cargo and passenger planes, you know,
Yes.
or passenger terminals. So the cargo terminals where I would go in there work and inspect things in there, and then so I was at Pan Am, and they said, well, there's a Connex box here that's supposed to have fish in it, but nobody ever came to pick it up.
Okay.
So I said, well, how long has it been here? Well, a week or so.
Oh, no.
Well, let's open it up and look. Because a lot of times people would mark stuff as fish and it wouldn't be fish. It would be T-shirts or something. It was something they didn't want to pay a tariff on.
Yes.
So they'd mark it as something it wasn't.
Yeah.
And nobody had opened up to check it. I said, well, let's open it up and see what it is. And sometimes stuff would come marked as fish, and it would be T-shirts.
Yeah.
And inside the T-shirts would be snakes.
Because they're trying to smuggle snakes in.
Well, they're trying to smuggle snakes in, but they got to keep them cold, so it'd be a fish, so they got to go in the refrigerators to keep them cold because they get active when they get. They didn't want them waking up.
Okay. So is that what happened when you opened this box?
No. So we opened up the Connex box, and it was shark fins.
Oh. A banned substance.
Well, it wasn't banned at the time.
Oh, was it not? Okay.
It was perfectly fine at the time, but somebody didn't pick it up for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Whoever was buying these shark fins and had them shipped didn't pick them up, but they'd been sitting there without refrigeration for a week.
Oh.
And I don't know if you ever smelled rotten fish.
Yeah.
Puts off ammonia gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we opened that thing up and everybody's hit with ammonia gas, and then Pan Am's business offices were up above the cargo terminal. So I effectively evacuated Pan Am's business operations at the airport.
Because none of them could breathe for
Nobody could breathe for a while, so all this ammonia went up into it.
Oh.
Was like they thought, you know, they got hit with some ammonia gas, which they did, you know.
Just the natural one.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fun job. So did you do that for very long?
I was there for a year.
Okay.
And well, I did it longer, but that was my primary job there, and then checking fishermen around the bay, and then we'd worked a herring fishery.
Okay.
If you ever watch that show, Dirty Jobs.
No.
Oh, you should watch that show sometime.
Okay,
Dirty
I'll
Jobs.
write it down.
Anyway, I think they actually featured this in Dirty Jobs, but this is probably one of the dirtiest jobs you can imagine.
Okay.
They gill net herring, and then they pull them in with a net, and then they got this beater board that shakes them out of the net.
Okay.
So the fishermen come out covered head to toe with fish slime and fish scales, and
Wow.
and then they just have to hose themselves off of it. As they talk about dirty job, that's a dirty job.
That sounds terrible.
It is.
Just keep your mouth closed on that one.
Yeah. So the herring fishery was a big fishery at the time when I was down there. It's since gone by the wayside because they overfished it, you know.
Yeah.
But that, you know, San Bruno was a town south of San Francisco, and it's kind of a hub for tropical fish. There was like 3 or 4 tropical fish warehouses
Okay.
that would get imported from all over the world there, and then they'd be distributed out to pet stores all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times saltwater fish and stuff they're catching in the wild and stuff, and then they end up there. I'd have to go in and inspect those things and make sure that they weren't buying some things they weren't supposed to be imported into California or anything.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the things that at the time when I first came on was they were looking out for grass carp.
Okay.
You ever heard of grass carp?
No, is it like a tropical type of fish?
Well, it's not really tropical. They're carp,
Yeah.
but they'll actually crawl out of the water to eat grass.
Really?
Yeah.
And they
So-
can breathe for a
Yeah.
short while or something?
So they would. People were smuggling them into California. They were putting them in golf course ponds to keep the weeds, algae and weeds and pond weeds out of the golf course. They want the ponds to be clear,
Yeah.
not have a bunch of tules and stuff growing here. So they would smuggle these in and put them so they wouldn't have to use chemical in the pond. They would put these grass carp in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so one of my jobs a couple of times was going to the golf course, borrowing a golf cart, and then driving around inspecting all their ponds. Because if it looked like if the grass was this high normally or whatever height, it was all trimmed down to the ground within 3 feet of they just kind of flop out and eat there and then flop back in the water.
So like normally it would be like 9 inches high, and if it's just like 2 inches high.
Yeah, or
that's the
just like
clue.
it'd be less than 2 inches high. It's just right down to the ground. It's the grass carp have been up here eating.
Ah.
So then I'd have to order that they get all the grass carp out of their pond.
Did you have the fun job of fishing them out, or how
No,
did you get them
no,
out?
they'd have to go. The biologists would come and poison them because they didn't want to
you
move
just do
someplace.
like a mass eradication.
Yeah, they put rotenone in there and kill them.
Yeah.
Now they've changed that since. You can now put grass carp in your pond.
Oh, you can.
You got to buy sterilized grass carp. They didn't want them getting in
Yes.
our natural
Messing
waterways.
up all the other fish.
Yeah, so now you can buy sterilized. You got to get a special permit, and then you can buy sterilized grass carp, and then you can put them in your golf course ponds.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing we had to look for one time was go through Chinatown and inspect all the shops there looking for mitten crabs.
And what are mitten crabs like?
They're freshwater crabs. They come from one little lake in the middle of China,
Okay.
but they're like a delicacy, and they're about this big, but they have their pinchers are all fuzzy, like they're wearing mittens.
Oh.
But because they're freshwater crabs, they have diseases that can affect humans and stuff, so they don't want them here.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that a thing? If freshwater is closer.
You don't eat any freshwater fish. Don't ever eat any sushi or sashimi from freshwater fish because they all have parasites and stuff and diseases that
are closer to us.
or can be carried at us. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Like you
that.
tell people, never. Sometimes these kids have died with brain amoebas from eating. Doing a challenge where they eat a raw snail. Never eat a raw snail because those have parasites in them that can kill you.
Really?
Yeah. Don't eat a slug. Don't eat a snail. Yeah.
No, but if you cook it, it's okay.
Cook is okay. Escargot, people eat them all the time, but don't eat anything raw.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nothing from the fresh water. All the fresh. That's why for years the Japanese would not eat eat salmon as sashimi, because in Japan they don't go out in the ocean and fish for salmon. They wait for the salmon to come up in the river and then they fish them
During
out of
that
the river.
spawning time, it's like.
Yeah, here we go out. Let people risk their lives, go out in the ocean to catch the salmon because they taste better. But in Japan they didn't do it for years. They didn't do it. They just fished them out of the fresh water, so they just like don't eat it. All the salmon, cook salmon
just not
skin or
enough to
whatever
do that.
is all cooked. But now there was a whole story on that. You could probably look it up. But the Norwegians started raising farm-raised salmon, and they would they took sent a representative over to Japan. It took him 30 years to convince the sushi restaurants in Japan to finally start serving salmon sashimi and buying their farm-raised fish. That this was clean and they could do that. So now you see sashimi farm-raised salmon around.
So that's interesting. So if it's salmon sashimi, it's most likely farmed salmon.
Most likely farmed salmon, and you can look at the salmon and tell whether it's farmed if you know what you're looking for. But
How does it look different?
it's fattier.
Okay.
It's kind of
Like
like
lighter pink.
it's lighter pink. You can see the fat between the muscles
I
and
know
stuff
what you
like
mean.
that,
Yeah.
as opposed to the solid pink red.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why and you want to be careful eating any wild salmon sashimi'd, because it could be coming from the Klamath River Indians out of the fresh water.
Okay.
Could have got infected already.
Interesting.
So yeah.
So
So
okay. So what was the next kind of step? So this is like fishing game. Did you move? Because I remember you telling me before that you moved up the coast over time.
well, yeah. So I always kind of did the marine thing. So I was working, doing the marine in the bay.
Okay, you're
and
still doing that.
chicken pet shops. There was a taxidermy shop in South San Francisco, San Bruno,
Yeah.
that claimed they taxidermied 90% of all taxidermy in the world. You'd go in there, it was a huge place. There'd be stacks of elephant hides and wolf hides and even stuff that wasn't allowed in the U.S. could go. They had a special permit. They could bring it there,
Taxidermy anything.
and then they sent it back. So like if you went to Africa and shot a zebra and had it taxidermied, it would come to their San Bruno, and they would taxidermy and send it back to Africa, and then do their thing and send it back to you.
So just like a frozen hide or a salted hide or something.
The salted hides would
goes
come
to
in
them.
to them, and they would tan the hides and then send it back to the taxidermist to mount on whatever mount the person wanted. So there was full body mount. They said they did all the Smithsonian Institute hides and stuff for the Museum of Natural Resources and stuff like that, all their displays.
Wow.
And they had a very interesting way of taxidermy. All their taxidermy was done with salt and sawdust.
Really?
Yeah. They had these giant, look like giant water tanker wine barrels that are on rollers that were basically big washing machines. And they would put in the hides in this big machine with concentrated salt, and it would tumble for whatever amount of days or hours in the salt, and then when it came out, just the tumbling would soften it up, everything.
Yeah.
And then they would throw it in another barrel with just sawdust of whatever kind of color tanning, tan oak and stuff, whatever darkness of tan they were trying to achieve for that taxidermy. They'd put it in there with all this sawdust, and it was more like wood chips, and they would just tumble around in there.
I guess that would clean the meat.
That would
scraps and all kinds of stuff
clean the meat. They cleaned everything, the hides off pretty good before they put them in there, but they would just tumble it in there until it was the softness and whatever, and it keeps the hide on and everything that way. They don't scrape the hide off. So
I actually just did an interview with a lady who talked me through the tanning process, like traditional tanning process.
Yeah, like the brain tanning and stuff.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and she was talking about how to soften it requires a lot of work continuing to move it. So it sounds like that's what those churning things were.
That's what it is.
Were achieving.
That's what, just achieving, because I don't know if they put other things in there to probably put other blocks of wood or in there or something to soften things up. They might have had some round balls or.
So what was your involvement with this taxidermy place?
Well, I just inspected to make sure
just make sure it was all okay.
All legit, and everything they were doing was legit. So I didn't go there very much because everything was legit every time I went in there, so I didn't have to worry about them too much. So.
But it was interesting to go see it.
It was interesting just to go in there and see it. And whenever I had a trainee or something, I'd take them in there just to go see it.
It's like
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they did so much. It was like, oh, I didn't know you guys did rhino hides here.
Yeah. It's kind of wild to see such big things, right?
Yeah. But if some museum around the world was mounting a full-body rhino, they were the ones that were doing it.
Interesting.
Curious. So that was interesting. And then I was the San Mateo warden doing that, and then the warden that was over in Half Moon Bay left. So that was the same squad. So I'd work over to Half Moon Bay sometime too. So then I moved over to Half Moon Bay.
So where's Half Moon Bay?
Half Moon Bay is directly across from San Mateo over on the ocean side.
Okay.
South of San Francisco, hour south of San Francisco over on the ocean side. So that I had a lot of rural area, a lot of steelhead streams. I had abalone, crabbing, commercial fishing, a lot of commercial fishing going on there. Commercial fishing. It's a port a little bit bigger than Fort Bragg here. So a lot of big boats came in and out of there.
Yeah.
All the commercial abalone divers were coming in and out of there because that was the shortest way to the Farallon Islands. That was the only place they were. Well, when I first got there, they could commercial abalone along the shore of San Mateo County. That was it, and Farallon Islands. So that's where all the abalone is. The problem is a lot of the abalone that we discovered later on were being taken up here and smuggled down there and then landed as. And I was kind of part of that, telling them, it says, hey, there's not as many abalone here as they're saying that they're fishing and catching here.
Yes.
So
they've been taken from somewhere
else. They're taking them from Mendocino and Sonoma County, and then illegally, and then bringing them down here and saying they're commercial abalone.
We caught them here.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So did you ever have any, you obviously, it sounds like you caught some people doing that. Did you ever have any other situations where you got busted people or caught people doing what they weren't supposed to be doing?
Well, lots of times.
Yeah.
We'd have things like, the commercial fishing boats.
Yeah.
They can go out and land a certain poundage of fish.
Okay. Individual or total?
total.
Okay.
It might be poundage for the month.
Yes.
Okay. And I'd have cases where they would go out and let's say they were allowed to land 25,000 pounds a month.
Yeah.
They went out and caught 50,000 pounds of fish. And then they came into San Francisco and offloaded 25,000 pounds of those fish on September 30th. And then their limits are monthly.
Yes.
Monthly or bi-monthly.
Yeah.
And then the next day, so they would do that, landed on the last day of September, okay, we caught our whole monthly limit. And then they still got 25,000 pounds of fish on board. And then they went down to Half Moon Bay, and they act like we've been out fishing for a couple days.
Yes.
And then they come into Half Moon Bay, and they hadn't been fishing, and they go, oh, and they want to land the other 25,000 pounds of fish.
So it's like a trick.
Yeah, so it's a good trip. So I caught one guy one time. It was like I knew he'd landed in San Francisco, and then he's down there the next days, down at Half Moon Bay, and I think it wasn't quite the end of the month yet. It was the day before. He had to wait a day.
Yes.
And then offload. And I said, I want to see what's in your hold. Oh, there's nothing. Well, you're pumping water because they circulate water for chilled water. I says, I want to see in there anyway. Well, there's nothing. Well, doesn't matter. I need you to open that up. And they pretended the hatch was stuck. I don't care if the hatch is stuck. I see that crane you got on the boat there? Rip it off if you have to. Well, the unfortunate thing that happened, the crew member that he made finally opened the hatch up. They had water circulating in there.
Yeah.
And the fish had been in there a while, and for some reason pressure had built up in there. When he popped the hatch blew off.
Really?
Took his thumb off.
Really?
Lucky it didn't take his head off, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he had too much water pressure in there. It was pressurized too much, and it blew the hatch. But anyway.
So he lost his thumb, and then
the poor crew member lost his thumb, and then the skipper got cited for having over limit.
Like a big fine.
Yeah, big fine, because it was a federal fine. And the feds, when the feds fine you here, they don't have criminal penalties for over limits of fish. Ours are criminal penalties.
And that's if it's statewide.
It's statewide.
Okay, that's.
But if you cite him under a federal violation, this is a federal limit he violated.
Yeah.
Because he's fishing out in federal waters. The feds, you don't get to go to court. You get to go plead before a federal magistrate up in San Francisco, the federal courthouse up there. But they charge you a civil violation. So basically they're suing you.
Interesting.
So you take over limit of fish, I said, oh, you got $50,000 worth of fish there. Okay, here's a bill for $200,000. You pay the $200,000, or you come to court and convince the judge to reduce the fee.
Yeah.
Either way, you're paying for it, and either way, you've lost
that money.
You lost the whole ship.
And you lost the 50,
you lost all the fish.
And you lost the 25,000 pounds worth of fish.
The fish have been forfeited, and that's already, the check was written to the feds.
Yeah.
And plus they get this fine, and then they got to pay it, or they got to go see the federal magistrate.
Yeah. And that's the way to the hospital for your thumb.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? That's a bad day.
That's a bad day for them.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for the crew.
Good day for you guys.
I felt sorry for the crew member, but yeah.
Yeah. Crikey.
And then there was times, in October, the Dungeness crab would come in to spawn on the sandy beaches, and we'd get groups of people down there that were poaching crabs in the middle of the night, be like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And they'd be out there, and what they'd do is they'd be in their underwear, and they'd be shuffling. They go out and shuffle their feet in the tidal area.
Okay.
And they'd feel a crab, and we got a fishing net, and they'd scoop them up. And it wouldn't take them long to fill a gunny sack full.
Okay.
So one day I had 13 guys down there doing it.
Yeah.
And
at like 2 o'clock in the morning.
At like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm by myself in the middle of nowhere, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I got 13 people to arrest.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
And that's not ideal for officer safety wise, but I was a crazy young guy. I got a. Game wardens often get nicknames from the constituents, especially the commercial fishermen. They want to give you a nickname because that way, when they see you coming, they could say your nickname and you don't know it, and they just got on the radio and told all their friends that you're in the area.
Okay.
So I found out what my nickname was. My nickname was Night Stalker because they'd never seen a game warden working at night before. But I was working with the military. In the military, all the stuff we were doing was at night, and we'd work till about 10 o'clock or midnight, and then we were flying with night vision goggles on and stuff. So we were doing all this night training with night vision, and then I'd get off work, and then I'd go to work for Fish and Game.
But did you still have the night vision?
I would go home with the night vision goggles. So I'm here up on the bluff watching these 13 guys who think they're in the dark. Nobody could see them. You know, they put shields on their flashlights, but they'd light a cigarette, and the little cigarette was like a blowtorch, you know, with a night vision goggle, so I could see what they were doing. And I waited till they all had their bags full, and they were all up on the beach discussing what they're going to do. And they usually had the wives or something come pick them up, and it was pretty cold. It was like October or something like that, and I watching all these guys, and all of a sudden, and I go down there, and I get right up to them. They don't know I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm standing in amongst their group.
Yeah.
And they don't know I'm there. And then I just turn the light on. Fish and Game, you're under arrest. And then it's like, they all scatter.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can see them. They running off in the dark with no flashlight, and they didn't go very far because they can't see.
Yeah.
There's no moon. And they run off and they stop, and I'd trot after them, and if they didn't stop, I'm right behind them, and I just push them and knock them down in the sand. Says, you're under arrest, don't move. I walk them back and sit them down, and I go get another one. I see another one crouched over there. I go and get him. You're under arrest. Go sit him down, and I got them all rounded up except for 3 guys. And so I march all these guys. 3 of the guys.
So it's 10 guys you've got.
Yeah. So the rest of the guys, they didn't stay on the beach. They ran up into the bushes.
Okay.
In their underwear. So we gather up all everybody's clothes and the crab and everything, and we went up to their vehicles up by the road, and we're up there, and I'm in my nice warm truck, and I get everybody's ID, and I'm writing tickets, watching these guys, and it takes me a couple hours to write all these tickets out, Well, these guys are run off in their underwear. They're freezing to death out in the bushes.
They're going to have to come back at some point.
Exactly. So then it was kind of I get all the tickets written out and get them signing all the tickets, and then it's hey, you guys, I knew they'd probably moved up pretty close by then. I says, you guys there in the bushes, I says, you can either freeze to death or you can come in now. I'm not leaving until you come out. So they come out, sign them up. So there's fun things like that,
You must have. I can understand why you're called Night Stalker.
Well, yeah, and another thing I like doing is most of the game wardens had their powerful telescopes, and they'd be off a half a mile away watching people. And I wanted to use a lot of my military training.
Yeah.
I wanted to see how close I could get to them.
It's another kind of hunting.
It was another hunt. It was just fun, So I this time I had these guys. I had a guy poaching abalone. He was out in the water, and he was taking overland abalone, undersized abalone. He was filling a dive tube. Well, he had his buddy was the lookout, and he was walking back and forth, and he's supposed to be watching for the game warden.
Yeah.
He's walking around and up there. Well, I snuck past him, and he's looking for the game warden back towards the parking lot. And I'm sneaking up where this guy was, and he's coming in, and he's got, his fogged up goggles on and everything. He's swimming in with this tube, and he sees me on the shore. Mm-hmm. I'm in civilian clothes because I'm undercover.
Yeah.
And he thinks I'm his buddy, and he pushes the tube to me, and I pull it out. It's got 50 abalone in this thing.
What's the daily limit at that point?
3 or 4. I think it was 4 then.
Okay.
Anyway, and plus most of them were undersized. Otherwise, you can't get 50 abalone in a tube if they were all legal size. And
Yeah.
then I grab him and get out of the water. You're under arrest. Then he's all pissed at his buddy.
Yeah, I bet.
You're under arrest. He's under arrest too. So I had a lot of fun ones like that. I had one time I was hiding in the bushes. We were doing an abalone detail, and I was watching the parking lot, and I was across the street hiding in the bushes. And there was a little pull out there. There was a gate here, but there was a pull out where people can pull in there and turn around or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there in the bushes, and some car comes in, and he pulls in and backs in there.
Yeah.
And throws a bag out of the window and lands right in my lap.
Yeah.
And I jump up and I says, "You're under arrest."
Well, okay.
And he's like, he's like shaking and everything like that. I open the bag up. It's full of crabs.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not crab season.
Okay.
It's these, crab poacher. And it wasn't really a crab poacher. It was a guy who was fishing off the beach for surf perch, and he was catching crab. He was keeping them.
He's just keeping them, yeah.
And we were doing a abalone detail, so we had like 10 or 12 wardens working the coast there, going back and forth. And I was just kind of working this one little area, and I go, "Why did you take these crabs and then come in here and throw them away?" He says, "Because I was fishing down in Santa Cruz County, and I was catching these crabs, and then I saw so many game wardens around." He says, "If there were so many game wardens," I says, "I thought there was a game warden behind every bush," and I was right.
That sounds like an unlucky day for him.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Anyway, I have a million of those stories.
Oh,
I could write a book, but...
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'd love to hear them. I bet, like, meanwhile, you're doing a lot of your own, like, fishing and hunting as well. And
Yeah, the thing about being a game warden, though, is you don't have a lot of time to fish and hunt because you're working. When it's
Especially
like
during
really
the season.
busy during the season. What I liked about one of the reasons I stayed doing marine stuff is because I could go up during the deer opener and work during the opener if I wanted to, but I didn't have to.
Okay.
And then I could find out where the deer were, and then I could go back hunting on my own.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't my assignment. I didn't have to work that all the time. I just had to work the marine stuff.
Just a light bit of
Yeah.
scouting.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So I enjoyed working the marine stuff. I like being on the water. I mean, I learned most of my, believe it or not, I learned most of my boating from the Air Force.
Okay.
Okay, because one of the things we did was we dropped jumpers for practice,
Yes.
and our drop zone was Monterey Bay and Bodega Bay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would jump into Monterey Bay all the time, and
Like parachute jumping.
so we had to pick up the parachutists.
Okay.
So because I had an interest in doing it, my job was taking care of the boat
Yes.
and running the boat and doing. When I wasn't jumping, I was in the water running the boat.
Oh.
And they sent me to Coast Guard coxswain school. So I've been to the Coast Guard school for their training,
So you got even more training.
get them more training, and so I learned most of my stuff doing that. And then the funny thing is, when I got in the fish and game, they said, "Oh, you want to go to the Coast Guard coxswain school?" I said, "Well, I've already been, but I'll go again."
Yeah.
So I went again.
Nice.
So that was fun. One of the funny things was when I was in my military uniform,
Yeah.
you'd be with a bunch of other people in the services, or you'd meet somebody from that was from another service that was retired or something, and they'd look at my ribbons and they'd recognize what each ribbon was. They try to figure out what each award ribbon was, and they'd go, guys would look at me who'd been in the Coast Guard. They go, "Were you in the Coast Guard?" Because they see me in the Air Force uniform, but I got a bunch of Coast Guard ribbons. Because
Yeah.
every time we did a Coast Guard rescue, they'd give us a ribbon.
So you're in the military, but you're rescuing for the Coast Guard.
For the Coast Guard. So
Yeah.
the Coast Guard would give us Coast Guard ribbons that we were authorized to wear with our Air Force uniform.
Aha.
So guys would ask me if I was in the Coast Guard. I go, "No, I was never in the Coast Guard." "Well, why are you wearing those Coast Guard ribbons?" I says, "Well, because Coast Guard gave them to me.
Nice.
A couple of those, I don't know if you want to hear these, but a couple of funny stories.
Yeah.
So, one year I'm in Fish and Game, and
What year is this, roughly?
ballpark maybe 1990
Okay.
or so.
Yeah.
No, because I think I was on the big boat. I think it was maybe like 92 or 93.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, the salmon season's about to open up. And sports salmon season opens up first and then commercial.
And then commercial
Yeah.
afterwards. Okay.
Well, the only place that any salmon were being caught was down in Monterey Bay.
yeah.
So commercial was about to open up. So all the commercial boats were down in Monterey Bay. Okay. And one of my jobs in the Air National Guard is I was the scheduler. So I would schedule the training for everybody. The pilots would say we need to drop jumpers on this day, and then I'd find them jumpers to drop on that day.
Okay. Just fitting it all together.
Fitting everything together. So it turned out that with Fish and Game, I knew that the commercial salmon season was going to open up on this weekend, this one day. And so I decided to schedule a military jump. And at the time, you remember the space shuttle that blew up? It might have been before your time, but the first one that blew up?
No, I think I know the one that you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was in the Air Force, when the Gemini and Apollo programs were going on, I told you about us being involved
Yes.
with that. Well, when the space shuttle came along, we were involved with the space shuttle too, because the whole space shuttle capsule could be ejected.
Yes.
Okay. Except when they decided we're going to have more than the 4 crew members, we're going to have all these science officers and stuff in the back. We're going to put them in the pod in the cargo compartment
Of the space shuttle.
of the space shuttle. That pod in the cargo compartment was not ejectable.
Really?
Yeah. It's just a pod, a life support pod in the cargo compartment.
Yeah.
Okay. So the capsule up there was ejectable
For the pilots.
for the pilot, for the 4 crew members. It all came out at once.
Yeah.
So we were trained how to open those up and rescue them out of there if we needed to and all that.
Yeah.
So when they sent up the crew module, I don't know if it was the first one or what, it was the one where they first let the civilian teacher go along,
Yes.
and it came apart on re-entry, and they lost everybody. They lost the crew also because they had disabled the ejection system on there because they didn't think it would look right if something happened and the crew lived and the scientists in the back died.
So that was their logic.
That was their logic.
It seemed unfair.
It seemed unfair. So that was a dumb decision.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like a dumb decision.
Yeah. So because when they first decided to do away with the ejection system on there, they go, we don't need you guys anymore. Because we're not landing this out in the ocean. They're not going to be ejecting.
There isn't going to be a rescue.
There's not going to be a rescue because we don't need you anymore. Well, after that happened, the politics said, you got to come up with a way for these people to eject. Okay?
Both the
both
people
of
in the
them.
back and,
So
and the crew.
They re-enabled the ejection system on the crew module, but in the back, they came up with this system that one would never work, but politically it looked like they were doing something. But see, when the thing came apart, the G-forces would not let you move.
Okay.
So, but this ejection.
So what does that mean exactly? So if the shuttle thing comes out or the pod comes out.
If you're going out of control, like in your car or anything else,
yes,
you're pinned against whichever direction, with the speed of this thing. When it goes out of control, you're pinned up against the wall.
like the people are pinned against the wall.
They're pinned against the wall, you're pinned against your seat, pinned against your seat belt.
Yeah.
If you do get up, you're going to go flying and get slammed against whatever.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to get out any door.
Yes.
So this rescue device that they came up with for the module, and they involved somebody getting up out of their seat and blowing a hatch. And then when the hatch blows, this bar would extend out of the module, and they would get up out of their seat and pull out they were sitting with parachutes,
Yes.
and they would pull out their static line parachute and hook up to this bar. It wasn't a steel cable, it was a bar. And actually it wasn't even a static line parachute. They would hook up to this bar somehow, and they would slide out this bar, and then when they come to the bar, they would fall, and either, depending on what altitude they're from, if they're up at 200,000 feet, you got to fall a long ways before you. They got their spacesuits on so they could survive that. But
Yes.
they'd have to fall till they get to a certain altitude, and then there's supposed to be an automatic opener on it
On a parachute.
on a parachute to open the parachute. It would never work, but the engineers convinced them that it's feasible. But they'd have to be in straight and level flight. And if they were in straight and level flight, they wouldn't be out of control where they'd have to eject.
So any kind of like
Yeah.
spinning force is
Yeah.
going to cause major problems.
Right. So they decided that we need you guys again. So we need you to come up with a way of rescuing these guys if they land in the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had to come up with a way of doing that. So the Navy SEALs already had a Zodiac rubber raft that they could launch underwater out of a submarine.
Okay.
It had a submersible outboard engine on it.
So this is just like a regular thing, like you see, like
Yeah.
a landing party with like a rubber ring.
Yeah,
kind of-
so you see the Navy SEALs going in with the landing party.
Exactly. Yeah.
They might have popped up out of a submarine from
Oh.
below.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they even have some that are powered where they could run it like an underwater submarine while they got their scuba gear on for a distance before they pop up.
Interesting.
And then they get to the surface, they can start up the outboard motor and motor wherever, or if they need to motor out, and
Yeah.
they can do it. So we said, well, let's get their rubber raft and their submersible engine, because these things are going to be landing in the water.
Yeah.
And we folded it all up, put it on a pallet, and put our medical gear and everything in there that we needed. And we rigged it up with a scuba bottle. So when you pulled a handle, the scuba bottle blew up the
Yeah.
folded up
inflates it.
rubber raft.
Okay.
And then we would jump on the rubber raft and start it up and go over to do the rescue.
So you're going to jump. The plan was to jump out of a plane with that.
Yeah. So at the same time we did this is when we said, okay, when we do this, we need to switch over from static line parachutes to free fall ram air canopy parachutes that are more maneuverable. So that's when we started free falling and doing what we call halo and hey-ho. Halo is high altitude, low opening, so you jump out at 18,000 feet and pull your parachute to 3,000 feet.
So you're falling for a long period.
You're
of
falling
time.
for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Or you may even, I've jumped up, up 20,000 feet, We'll go up as high as 30,000 feet you can jump.
Really?
Yeah. And then fall for a long, then there's hey-ho, where you might jump out at 30,000 feet and immediately pull your parachute, and then you could fly it for 30 miles.
Oh.
Okay. The problem with that is the parachute's nylon shows up like an airplane on a radar. You're better off with the halo, where you come down fast just with the body of a person.
It doesn't show up.
It doesn't show up so much until you come down low, below radar level, to pull your parachute. But anyway, so we were doing this free fall parachuting,
Yeah.
and we have the love raft, and then we put us on a aluminum pallet that sits in the C-130 that's on rollers. There's rollers on the floor of the C-130, and it's tied down. And then when you get ready, you cut the strap and then you push it. It's got a cargo parachute on it. You push it the cargo parachute's on a static line.
Yes.
You push it out the back of the C-130, and the parachute opens up, and then we just Superman off the back
You
with
just
our free fall
follow
parachute,
it.
and then we follow the package down, and whoever lands closest to the package pulls the red handle,
And you got a boat.
blows up the boat and starts up the engine, and then we... So the salmon season is about to open,
Yeah.
so I schedule a training jump on the opening day of commercial salmon season. And we're jumping with dry suits.
Yeah.
So I've got my fish and game uniform underneath my dry suit, and we do that whole, and we're there where there's all these commercial fishing boats. They can see what's going on. They're watching, and some of these guys have seen it before. It says, oh yeah, it's like, it's military doing some training, and they see us come out and see the boat, and
so they see a big plane fly over.
See a big
people
plane
jump
fly out, a car shoot, people jumping out, and they're watching it come down, and they blow up the boat and everything. And I get on the boat and I take off my dry suit and I got my fish and game uniform on and everything, and we go over and start checking boats. I start jumping on boats,
Yeah.
and then we turn the radio on and listen to it. It's like, all I just need to do is check a half a dozen boats, and it says, man, it's just fish and game. They're dropping wardens out of the sky on us now. So I got a lot of mileage out of that one.
Oh, that's a lot of extra funding.
A lot of extra funding that way. So we had fun doing that.
Oh, brilliant. I bet they were like keeping their eyes on the skies for a while after that.
So you know where the Shoreline Amphitheater is? Down by Mountain View?
No, I don't know that.
So down by Mountain View, they have a lot of big concerts down there. If you hear about the Taylor Swift or the Jonas Brothers, they might be at Shoreline Amphitheater or something. So it's right next to Moffett Field. Okay. So we used to do training jumps on Moffett Field there too and stuff. So at Shoreline Amphitheater, they had just finished building the amphitheater, and there's a big lake there. Not real big. It's like maybe 10 acres or something. But they wanted to know if we could, like, for their opening ceremonies, if we could come and do a demonstration jump.
Yeah.
In the middle of their activities, and I'm the scheduler again. So it's like, well, how about if we jump into the lake? Oh, that'd be cool. Okay. So we set up a training thing there. So we fly over, do our thing, and we parachute into the lake, and everybody's watching and clapping, So we and we got people there on the ground to pick up our parachutes and stuff, and you've got a boat there and stuff. But the jumpers, all of us, and I made sure I was one of the jumpers, and so we jump out and then we swim in the shore. We didn't get on the boat. They picked up our parachutes. We swam. We just dropped everything like we were doing a real mission. You don't salvage that. We just dropped the parachute and everything. We swam into shore, and as we're walking out of the shallows, we're taking stuff off and dropping it, and we got our civilian clothes on underneath, and we just dropped it. We did the James Bond thing. We just kind of dropped everything and then disappeared into the crowd.
Oh, brilliant. Nice, just take a seat.
Just take a seat.
That's a VIP entry.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got, this is a story, and if you've got more stories, I'd love to hear them.
I have a lot of more stories.
Okay, well maybe if you think of any, then jump in.
For my close calls, I've had a couple malfunctions.
Okay, tell me.
I've had 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Like mid-air moments?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well,
just you're in the air and...
The first time was I was up at Spokane on my first assignment.
Yeah.
And we're doing parachute jump. We're in helicopters.
Okay.
You don't need to jump out of a helicopter usually. It can usually land. But for keeping up our parachute currency, because we got money if we jumped every month, we got extra pay.
Okay.
So keep up our parachute currency, and so when you transfer a unit where you're required to jump, you don't have to go through training again. You've just been jumping.
Yeah.
So we would jump out of the H-1 helicopters, and they're small, so you're sitting on the floor and you kind of hang your legs out the side with your feet on the skids and something. You just kind of jump out, and then the static line goes through some rings on the floor. It's a cable. It goes to the rings and then clips together. Well, it just so happened we were getting an inspection from headquarters. Okay, so we got these guys coming in to go check out what we do, and one of the requirements is jumping. So my squadron commander, or PJ commander for he was an E8. Anyway, he asked me to be his student. I was playing student, and he was the instructor, and
yes,
putting me out as a jumper.
Yeah.
And then the guy who was doing the inspection, they work up at headquarters and they don't get to jump very often. So one of the reasons they ask us to do this is one of their inspection criteria is they want to go to jump.
Yeah.
So he was jumping second.
Okay.
So I was going out and he was going behind me. And so we go over the drop zone and the boss tells me, he says, "Oh, let's not use this old jump cable that was all, looked like it had some wear and tear on it. It's
Yes.
perfectly fine. We've been using it for years."
That's the standard thing that you clip on.
Yeah.
And you don't have to activate yourself. It just
Yeah,
pulls your
it's
parachute.
the steel cable, not the cord that pulls the parachute, but the steel cable that's on the floor that you hook the cord to.
Okay.
And the C-130, it runs up here, and you hook it up here. It's above your
It's like
head.
above your head. Okay.
But down on the helicopter, there's no place to hook it on the ceiling. There's a place to hook it on the floor, so we hook it on the floor. So you bring the carbell around and you hook it together, and then it's got two ends that are swedged on this cable. So he says, "Well, go get one of the new cables." There were some new cables that we hadn't used. They're all certified and everything. So I get the cable and I put it on the airplane and everything, and we use that. Well, when I jumped out of the airplane, the cable separated because the swedging, the cable was in there and it was supposed to be swedged, never got swedged.
And what does swedge mean?
Well, it's clamped, so the cable fits into a stainless steel tube and then it's clamped on there.
Okay.
And that's,
That's how it's attached.
yeah, and it's like certified to 10,000 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the end of the cable goes like this, and then you put a bolt through it to hold the cable together.
So it's like this.
It's like that.
It's not coming undone.
Not going to come undone.
Yeah.
So works fine unless somebody who was supposed to be doing the swedging didn't swedge it, and whoever was supposed to be doing the cable testing didn't test it.
Ugh.
So whatever contractor did it screwed up, so when I jumped out, I wasn't hooked to anything. I pulled the cable pulled out, and I look up and I wasn't hooked to anything. Nothing's happened.
So you just.
So
popped it
what
off the
happened
cable.
was I take it back. I went second
Okay.
because I was supposed to be the
student.
yeah, and I was putting him out.
Yes.
So the inspector went out first, and then
Yeah.
I went out. Well, when he went out, his parachute partially opened, and then it came loose. And I went out, and I saw it come loose just as I was kind of committed. As I was going out, I saw the cable go with him,
Oh no.
and I saw his static line go with him. And the static line is supposed to stay on the plane.
Yeah.
And his opened up partial away, but it didn't come out. He had to use his reserve.
It wasn't enough for that to make
Wasn't
it
enough to
deploy.
come out and deploy. And I went out. Mine didn't even partially come out because it wasn't hooked to anything. When I jumped out, I wasn't hooked to anything. The instructor said he tried to grab it, so he thought he could pull it
Yeah.
himself if he grabbed, but he missed it.
Oh.
So the funny thing was at the time I was doing some civilian jumping,
Yeah.
and so I was into civilian skydiving. We had an aero club on the base and a little skydiving club we started on the base, so I was doing that.
Yeah.
So in our procedures for the military, you're supposed to deploy your reserve and not cut away. But see, like when he had this crap overhead, partially deployed, you pull your reserve, sometimes it'll go up and wrap around there.
And then that's not going to work.
And that's not going to work. Then your parachute can't open up.
So that's a tricky situation.
It's a tricky situation. But I didn't have anything up there. I just had the static line up there.
Yeah.
And I just pulled my reserve immediately.
Okay.
And then it opened. So the guys on the ground didn't know I had a malfunction.
Okay.
One, because they were watching him.
Yes.
And then I pulled my parachute so quick they thought I opened up at a regular time.
Yes.
And they weren't paying attention to me. So they went over and they picked him up and everything. And then they come over to pick up me, and the guy at the ground goes, "Gee, you packed that parachute up nice." I go, "I didn't pack anything." I said, "I didn't use it." He goes, "What?" He didn't know I'd even deployed my reserve. I said, "No, this is my reserve parachute here."
So did the other guy get it figured out?
Yeah, he just popped his reserve and it came out fine.
So it didn't get tangled up.
Didn't
so
get
it was
tangled up, and
okay.
he was okay. So
Sure, that must have been a stressful moment.
yeah.
But it worked out.
It worked. Everything worked out. And the next time I was on a static line jump also, and the next time,
From a chopper.
no, this was from a C-130.
Okay.
So we were doing training up at Galena, Alaska. So Galena is a little forward air base where they stationed 2 fighter jets to intercept any Soviet jets that are coming over the poles.
Okay.
It's out in the middle of Alaska, right next to the Yukon River.
Yeah.
And there's a little air base there, and there's a Native American reservation there too.
Okay.
And that's the only people who live there besides the people tending the air base. And we'd fly in there and do training in the summertime. And basically what it was is our squadron commanders wanted to go up there and go salmon fishing. So they'd say we're going to go up and go training up at Galena. There wasn't anything to do there except fish.
Yeah.
And even the natives don't like the summer times there because it's all swamp around there. It's a river and swamp. When everything freezes over, they can get on their snowmobiles and their dog sled and go up to Fairbanks or whatever. They go do their trapping and earn their money.
Mm-hmm.
But mosquitoes are terrible too up there.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
So anyway, we flew in there. I'd never been there before, and we didn't land and then go back up and jump. We were going to, as we got there, we were going to jump out. Okay.
Yeah.
So the center of the runway there was like, there's a 3-way runway. It's got a little triangle in the center of the runway.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all grass. It was all grass around the other runways.
So how big's that triangle in the middle?
Oh, maybe 30, 40 meters, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we parachute out, and I have a malfunction. So one of the problems we were having with the round parachutes at some time, we had, when the Army jumps out, they have solid round canopies.
Yes.
Ours had modifications on it where they had holes on one side, and then they had toggles, so you could pull the toggle and you get the parachute to turn. So you could turn it into the wind or whatever.
Yeah.
It had about a 10-mile-an-hour forward airspeed, so you could, a little bit control, you could kind of try to hit your target.
Okay.
So we're trying to jump in, you're trying to hit that center in between the runways. Well, when I jumped out, sometimes what would happen with the wind turbulence and stuff out of the C-130, once in a while, and this didn't happen very often, the parachute would invert, and part of it would go through the cutout for the modification, but it wouldn't go all the way through, and then you just have a wad of crap.
That's not doing anything.
Not doing
effective.
anything. So all you can do is pull the reserve.
Yeah.
Well, because I was free fall parachuting a lot, also,
Yeah.
and in civilian free fall parachute, we teach people to cut away their main and then pop their reserve, so you don't have anything to tangle up on.
Yeah.
In the military, they still teach pop your reserve and take your chances.
Okay.
They think something fluttering up there is better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I immediately popped my main and then popped my reserve, and it came down, and I ended up landing on the concrete on the runway, which was okay. I was still a lightweight at the time, and I landed on the concrete in one way. What's funny was, as everybody else landed on target,
Yeah.
they got massively eaten up by mosquitoes because we didn't land there and put mosquito repellent on first. Nobody thought about that. They got massively eaten up by mosquitoes. I didn't get any mosquito bites because I was out on the concrete. And then the chief of the tribe there, he like wanted to take me under his wing, and then I couldn't buy a drink. It's like he took me around to show me off to everybody. Oh, this is the guy that almost died. This is the guy that almost died.
So, I just want to make sure I understand. So, like, your parachute, just the first one failed, and you just
You immediately pulled the reserve.
just
Yeah.
immediately pull that
Yeah.
second one. So, but like, hopefully that second
And
one
then when
doesn't fail.
When the second one doesn't fail, then you owe the rigger who packed it a case of beer.
Is that the rule?
Yeah.
Oh,
If he drinks.
yeah.
If not, you owe him a case of soda.
So then you became a celebrity,
I became a celebrity for the tribe there because that was their whole excitement for
the survivor.
the summer was our air show we get put on for them.
Was there a third malfunction? Or was
Yeah,
that the
so
third one?
later on we were jumping down at Moffett Field, and we were jumping with the square canopies, and I had a malfunction there where it didn't fully deploy, and I had to pull my reserve. And the interesting part about that was I always pack my own parachutes,
Yeah.
but I was like an E9 now, and I was letting one of the younger guys pack my parachute. So the guy that packed my parachute he screwed up on something, that's why it didn't open.
Yeah.
So that's when I thought maybe it's time to retire. You know, the only way you get promoted in this outfit is somebody above you dies or retires. Maybe I better retire before they knock me off.
Before they start getting ideas.
Yeah. I don't know if that's not that if that pack job on my parachute wasn't on purpose. Yeah.
I bet he was in trouble after that.
No, we just gave him a bad time I just teased him about that. So I know he didn't really mean it on purpose, but
yeah, I guess you wouldn't want to wish that on anyone, would you?
no.
You're certainly not going to be the one that gets promoted.
Shit happens sometimes.
That's for sure. Matt, so how many times do you think that you jumped? Like, because that's 3 times that things went wrong.
Yeah.
Thousands?
Probably a couple thousand, maybe more.
So
because I was doing at one time I was doing a lot of civilian jumping too.
Yeah.
When I plus all my military jumping, so.
Yeah.
I just kind of after a while quit counting.
Yeah, you got to get to that point.
There was a lot of times, you know, the was kind of fun doing this is when we didn't have to go out there with a whole bunch of gear on and do a normal training jump.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pilots would call up and says, "Oh, we got a new pilot here, or we got somebody behind under currency. We need to get some jumps. He's got to, you know, they have currency, but they got to drop jumpers."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, how many jumps do you need?" I said, "Well, we need about maybe 5 passes." And it'd be like just maybe me and one other guy available.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, there's like only 2 of us here. Okay, we'll each grab 5 parachutes and we'll come out there and jump 5 times in one day, you know." And we'd go out to a place called Crow's Landing, which is out along I-5. There's a little town called Crow's Landing.
Yeah.
South of Stockton, way south of Stockton. Anyway, south of Livermore. Anyway, there was a Navy base out there, Navy Air Station, that was taken over by the Ames Research Center for their test pilots or test, you know, when they're testing a new aircraft.
Yeah.
Like when they built the Osprey, you know what the Osprey is?
No.
Well, the Osprey is one the Marines use the Osprey now. I think the Air Force has a few too, but they're a helicopter fixed wing. They're a fixed wing with big blades that can tilt the wing up like this, and they can land vertically.
I've seen that. Yeah, yeah.
So they call it V-stall or VTOL. Anyway, vertical takeoff and landing. So they can take off vertically and then tilt over as they're going. Those are called Ospreys.
Okay.
So they were testing those at Moffett Field and out here at Crow's Landing at the time. And so that was a place where they would go out there and do a lot of touch and goes and stuff. So nobody hardly used that airfield except them and us. So when they weren't using it, we started using it for drop zones. Because it was out in the middle of nowhere, and, you know.
Yeah.
If you landed out in a field someplace, you get a cantaloupe or a watermelon.
Nice.
But anyway, we'd go out there. It was fun because then you would just goof off and, you know, do flips off the back and
Just play.
Just jump off, and then they'd land, and you run on there, put on another parachute, and go jump again. It was like doing a civilian jump, you know, just so the pilot could run his jump patterns.
Do his quota.
Get his quota of jump patterns that he had to get for the month.
That sounds pretty ideal.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty ideal.
Yeah.
Well, so you've given me so many stories already. There's one that I wanted to pick your brains about because we talked about this briefly recently. I guess a bit of context. It's funny because I remember when we spoke before, you told me all these stories and these wild stories about military and rescue stuff and being in action and I remember you saying, like, you know, you've said it, I think, in this podcast, you know, people didn't expect you to survive very long and
yeah.
and you did. And relatively unscathed, but I guess something that you have dealt with is like some shoulder issues, right? Like you for a while you actually weren't able to draw a bow back.
Yeah.
You haven't been able to hunt archery for a while because and do you think that that's from all of the mischief that you've gotten up to?
Well, that and other things. 2 things that caused that.
Yeah.
The first of all, backing up, is I didn't think I'd live past 30.
Yeah.
Being in pararescue. One of the reasons I didn't get married till I was 40.
Yeah.
Because all my colleagues and friends and stuff, you know, either leave behind kids without a father, or they end up divorced because they're gone all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, honey, I got to leave for 6 months, but I can't tell you where I'm going.
It's not not great
you know,
relationship
and
material.
in the Air Force at the time, one of the reasons I got off active duty and went in the Air National Guard, decided to get off active duty, is because I was stationed with guys who were, the Air Force assignments would be 12 months in remote assignments. It's like when I was in Thailand over there, you couldn't bring your family over there. It was wartime and it was a remote assignment. You had to go over there for 12 months without your family.
Wow.
So guys would come back and their wife is living with somebody else and they're divorced or whatever, you know, or they got a kid that's already 6 months old that they have never seen.
Yeah.
You know, so
It's a long time away.
And then knowing that what the Air Force would do is you get a 4-year assignment stateside and then you get a year remote. And it was kind of like every 4 years I got to go away for a year.
Yeah.
Away from family.
That's
and
tough.
that was kind of against my plans.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like, yeah, I don't want to do this to somebody.
Of course. I mean, it makes sense.
You know, and probably not totally intentional. I went through a couple girlfriends, you know, that way. It was like, you know, where they say either me or pararescue. You know, well, okay, nice knowing you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, at least you know what you want.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, every time I went out on a training mission, even, or a real mission, I'd come back and that day or the next day, I'd feel like a quarterback who got sacked 3 times in a game, you know.
Yeah.
Things were sore, you know, and when you're young, things heal up pretty fast. And a lot of times, because I was a paramedic anyway, and I knew a lot of medical stuff, a lot of times we treated our own injuries rather than a lot of the stuff, you know, I'm paying for it now because a lot of it's not in my medical history records, you know. I might have a military disability, but they say, well, you never claimed that when it happened. I says, well, I know. We
didn't know at the time.
We treated ourselves, you know.
Okay.
I knew that maybe I had a torn muscle or ligament or something like that, but I just shrugged it off.
Yeah.
You know,
so the culture, right?
So yeah. So then, the other thing too is I don't know if this happened during military or fishing game, but sometime when I was out, most likely fishing game, but sometimes I was laying out in the woods, I got Lyme disease. I caught it, but I was having neurological symptoms. So being from the medical profession, I knew how to look up my symptoms. There's websites. At the time, there's a book called a Merck Manual.
Okay.
You can find it online too. You can look up your symptoms, and it'll tell you all the possibilities that what that might be.
Yeah.
And you can go through those possibilities. So I was having neurological issues where I was having a hard time pulling the gun. I couldn't do pull-ups anymore, and I started shaking holding my gun when I shot.
Yeah.
And I looked up my symptoms that I was having, and it said I either had MS,
Yes.
ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease,
Yeah.
or Lyme disease. So those aren't good news.
No, none of those are.
So I went to the doctor and told him. He says, well, there's only one thing we could do anything about, so let's test you for that first. And he tested me for Lyme disease, and I had Lyme disease.
Oh, so it was quite late stage then. To
No,
have having neurological
well, I was
issues.
having neurological. I don't know how late stage. It might have been 6 months. It might have been earlier. So that's why I said I don't know where I got it from the military. I got it from Fish and Game.
Yeah.
But they treated me with antibiotics, and it seemed to cure it.
Okay.
My neurological symptoms cleared
Took
up.
like a big dose for a few weeks or something.
Well, it was multiple big doses of multiple different antibiotics.
Yeah.
And then they test your urine to see if there's any dead Lyme in the urine. So they can't test you to see if your body already has antibodies for Lyme, so they can't test you that way. So they give you a heavy dose of antibiotics, and then they test your urine to see if you got any dead Lyme in it.
And the dead Lyme shows that it's worked?
Well, the dead Lyme shows that you still have it. So what they do is they give you the treatment.
Yeah.
Then they have you off the treatment for a while, and then they give you a heavy dose of antibiotics, and then they test your urine to see if they've killed any. The ideal is you don't have any because you've killed it the first time and not the second time.
Yeah.
You had nothing to kill the second time.
Okay.
So then they tell you that you may be cured, or it may 20 years from now pop up again because.
It's just their underlying.
Well, Lyme disease, if you know anything about Lyme disease, it's a spirochete bacteria.
I've read a little bit about it.
Spirochete bacteria that's the same as syphilis or the same as chickenpox, the comes out of shingles. They hide in your spinal column for years, and then they can pop out later on. So some people who don't get treated early enough, things pop out all the time. They're constantly getting treated.
Like a relapse kind
It
of.
get relapse. So I haven't had any relapses, so I'm pretty confident they've cured it because it's been since about 2006. But
Yeah.
if you read about antibiotics, the antibiotics, one of the side effects can be snapped ligaments and tendons. So not long after I got my Lyme disease treatment and all the antibiotics, I was scuba diving, and I was doing what I usually don't do. It's kind of a dumb thing to do, is I was pulling myself up on the boat ladder with one hand while I was still wearing my weight belt and my tank.
Yeah. It's a
I
lot
should have
of
taken everything
weight.
off and floated it or threw it on or had somebody take it or whatever, but I think I was the first one on the boat or something. It was two of us on the boat. And I felt a ligament in my hand snap.
Ugh.
And you can see the scar there. It's been repaired.
Yeah.
I had surgery there. But then I also had injuries in my shoulders. You know, one time I was pruning overhead and I felt a snap in my shoulder. And so, but before that, the doctor said, you got some old injuries there with rotator cuff
Issues.
tears. And he said, this one here, he says, you got the same ligament torn over here. But he says, that happened years ago, so that was probably military related. You know, one of those times I was trying to pull myself up with 200 pounds of gear up on the ship, you know, as it was bouncing up and down. So anyway, so yeah, I've had some injuries. So because of that, you know, my injuries weren't so bad. I was able to pull the bow, and I was doing pretty fine. I never cranked it up all the way to 75 pounds, but I was, you know, 55 was good.
Yeah, I know.
You know, so I was enough. So I was pulling the bow and everything like that, and then I had some shoulder issues where, like I said, I was pruning and I snapped the ligament, and that was after I had both shoulders repaired,
Like
surgically repaired, and then I snapped another ligament, and this was during COVID. They repaired it again. But since then, I've been having shoulder pains and stuff, and you know, I tried pulling the bow and it wasn't quite working. So my doctor signed the form that Fish and Wildlife now authorizes for disabled archer's permit. So
like
if you
a
had
medical exemption.
Yeah, if you get a medical exemption, disabled archer's permit, you can shoot a deer with a crossbow.
Which means that you can get it back out there during deer season archery. Right?
Yeah, so I can get back and hunt deer season archery again. So this was my first year that I hunted archery with a crossbow.
In how many years?
It's been a while since I hunted deer with a bow.
Yeah.
Anyway, and a long time since I actually got a deer with a bow.
Yeah.
Not like you, starts at the first year and
I think it took me at least a year. Yeah. But so you told me a bit of a story, and I feel like I had in some accidental way a bit of involvement as well. Like, tell me about that trip that you made. So where did you go?
We were up scouting. I think it was the day after opening day. It was I think it was Sunday. It might have been Monday.
And whereabouts was this?
Maybe it was Monday. We were up in C Zone, which is up by Lake Almanor.
Okay, in California.
In California.
Yeah.
And that area 2 years ago burned. And there's a lot of new growth coming there, so the deer are kind of attracted to that. So
yeah,
there was a lot of deer up there. And because this year we had a lot of water, there's a lot of water too.
Yeah.
You know, which made it a little harder because you didn't know the deer aren't concentrated around the water. There's like water everywhere.
They could go anywhere, yeah.
Anywhere. So the deer were spread out, but there was a lot of deer. Unfortunately, there was a lot of hunters too. We didn't expect that many. Usually I didn't run in that many hunters during archery season, but there was a lot of hunters because they were, I think the year before was real good, and so a lot of people told their friends and everybody went there. So it was almost like opening rifle season here.
Yeah.
But, you know, most of us in the archery, the deer they're not hiding out as much.
Yeah, they're not
so
as scared.
You kind of drive around and look for, you know, tracks coming down the bank, and so you see, well, there's deer in this area, or you look for deer. A lot of times what I found that deer will often, especially if there's a lot of hunters and it's busy, deer like to lay uphill looking down on the road watching the hunters go by.
Oh, okay.
And most 99% of the hunters are looking for a full body deer standing there. They're not looking for just an ear or just a nose or just a patch of skin.
Yeah.
And so they drive by most things. And so we were driving, we'd actually gone hunting further up in the hills. We were coming back towards camp, and we ended up behind somebody who was driving along road hunting slow. So let's go down this other road. So we turned off down a road, and I was hunting with some game warden friends.
Yeah.
And so a game warden friend and his son, so he was in the back seat back there on the right side, and he spotted a deer 100 yards, bedded down 100 yards up the hill above the road.
Huh.
So we stopped to get out and look, and it was a nice 4-pointer. And
a 4-pointer is a 2x2, is that right?
no,
or is it 4x4?
For West Coast count on blacktail and mule deer, they count one side.
Okay.
So East Coast, they count one side and they don't count the eye guards.
Yes.
So this would have been a 10-pointer if you were East Coast count.
Okay.
Okay, 4x4 and eye guards.
Yeah.
So he spotted that deer up there. So I get out with my crossbow. And one thing about these crossbows is they're made for mostly East Coast hunters who set up in permanent stands.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They weigh 2 or 3 times what your normal rifle weighs.
Yeah, yeah.
They're heavy.
I've held one. They're heavy. Yeah.
So they're not something you want to go packing around.
Yeah.
And they also take a while to load. You know, you can't run around in your car with a bolt in the thing. You can have them cocked with the safety on, but you can't have the arrow, just like a bow.
Yes.
Can't have an arrow knocked. So
Yeah.
same thing, you can't have it in a crossbow. So you have to get out, and you have to there, and you know, it's really hard to hold it steady because it's so heavy. So you gotta.
You're definitely not going to reload
You gotta
that
get
thing
the
quick either.
No, you're not gonna reload it. You gotta get the tripod out.
Yeah.
You gotta set it up. You know, like most bows, they're also sensitive to drop off. You know, for range. So you want to range it so you know how far
Yeah.
you're shooting.
Yeah.
You know, and so we got out and stepped off the road and set up the tripod, and the deer got up from his bed, moved a little bit, and I moved a little more so we could see it, and trying to get him. And the crossbow, you don't have the same sights. You actually have a scope, but they're not magnified.
Yes.
So in the scope, it's got your lines for distance,
like your drop lines.
your drop lines.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, this scope, we're in a burned area, everything's black, and the scope drop lines are black.
Oh.
And you're not allowed to have lighted reticle on the scope.
Okay.
So, under the archery regulations. So, I'm trying to pick up the line. The buddy with me, he's like ranging. He says, "Oh, it's 105 yards."
That's a long way.
Yeah, that's not long for a crossbow.
No, I guess not.
And he'd already shot his buck with his bow at 70 yards.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the deal was his father, he wasn't comfortable shooting anything over 50 yards.
Uh-huh.
So the deal was that anything over 50 yards I would shoot, and he would shoot anything under 50.
Okay. Sounds like a good deal for you.
That was a good deal for me. So we stepped out, and I finally got acquired, and then just about I'm about getting acquired on that, my phone rings. And I'm like trying to reach in my pocket and turn it off. I forgot to put it on silent.
And who by chance is calling you?
And I got it's a duck quacking as my phone ringing.
Yeah.
So the duck's quacking, and I'm trying to turn it off, and it turns out later when I got a chance to look at the phone, it was Robin was calling me right at the most inopportune time. He calls, but when he called and I was fiddling around there, another buck stands up and walks out in the open, and this buck's bigger than the first one. This one's only a 3x4, but he's bigger, he's wider and taller.
Like a big body as well.
A bigger body, yeah. So I put the bead on him because he was in the clear, and we shot him with the crossbow.
Oh, well, you're very welcome.
Yeah, right. And I didn't have to follow him very far. It was both the crossbow and my buddy with his compound bow. Both deer looked like they were shot with a 300 Win Mag.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because we were both shooting them from behind, quartering away.
Yeah.
So they went basically all the way through the body.
Like in through the ribs, out through the
Yeah,
chest
so
kind
like
of
mine
area.
went through his left ham,
Oh, really?
and it just caught an edge of it.
Yeah.
But then it went up through his guts and liver and lungs and
Everything.
out the front, so it was massive amount of bleeding.
Just dropped quickly.
Yeah, he didn't go very far. He just went up the top of the hill a little bit and went down. And then his did the same thing. His was downhill, and his just ran downhill about 80 yards and dropped.
Nice.
So, but it was kind of like, oh, you got to cut away more bloodshot meat on a arrowed buck this way than you do on a with a rifle. If I had a rifle, I would have shot him in the head.
True.
At 100 yards.
That's true. You don't want to like shoot the whole way through their body, ideally.
Not with a 300,
Yeah.
or any other rifle. Yeah.
No, I saw the same thing happen this weekend with a rifle that went in through the ham and made a big...
I'm going,
Make a big
after I
mess.
thought about it, I go, I should have shot him in the head.
With the crossbow?
With the crossbow.
Really?
Yeah. Or
Interesting. Yeah, like behind the neck.
neck shot him right here or something.
That would
'Cause he was
definitely
looking back at me like this,
do some damage.
Yeah.
What?
I actually missed one previously that I did try to shoot in the head, so that's why I didn't.
Oh, so that trip.
That trip.
Oh.
I'd already missed a buck.
So you like, I'm not going to take chances
I'm not going to try that again. But I hit the tree.
Yeah.
I could only see the head and neck sticking out, and I actually tried to get him a little farther back, and I hit the tree.
Yeah. Because it's like you're glancing past the tree to get the shot on the
Yeah,
the
so
edge.
I should have if I'd have just aimed right at his neck, I would have been better off.
Yeah.
I probably could have jugular veined him or something.
I think I learned that lesson trying to shoot turkeys in the head at first when I first started. And I just kept missing their heads, and I was like, I need to just shoot at a bigger object.
Bigger object, yeah.
And that started working out for me better.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm happy to have played a positive part in some capacity.
Some capacity in getting my first buck with a crossbow.
Now, whenever I'm calling you, I'm a little bit like concerned. Like, is this a good time?
Like I said, I should have it on silent. Like I put this one on. See, of course, nobody called me while I had it on silent. Oh, actually, it would have beeped. Somebody texted me. Oh.
Thank you for like spending so much time telling me all these stories, and just had like a great time hearing all this stuff.
If you want more details or different stories, I could probably come up with some, but you'll have to remind me of the ones I already told you, because
well, yeah,
I have a tendency to forget which ones I've already recorded.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, that wraps it up for potentially multiple episodes. So
yeah, okay.
I'll go back to the editing suite and have a play around.
You'll spend hours editing that one.
Yeah, I know. It's
getting the extraneous noises out of here.
True. That's always a
my
fun
finger
challenge.
tapping.
Alrighty, that's the end of our Dennis McKiver double episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. If you did enjoy the episode, then a quick share with a friend always goes a long way. Thanks to Dennis for sharing his incredible story. I do have plans to get him back on the show at some point to share some practical tips about how not to die while out having fun in wild places. I figured given all his medical training, plus his uncanny ability to avoid perishing in a whole cocktail of uncomfortable ways, it definitely makes sense to try and extract some of those mysterious secrets of his. Thanks to everyone listening. We've already heard some fantastic adventures, and I'm excited to say there's plenty more lined up ahead. That is all for now. Cheers, everyone. Until next time.